Welcome to you from TUMCREATE, TUM's research platform at CREATE in Singapore. My name is Ulf Schlichtmann. I would like to give a brief introduction. TUM, the Technical University of Munich, we have actually been present in Singapore for more than 20 years. First with TUM Asia, our teaching subsidiary, which is going very strong still. And then since 2010, we have partnered with the National Research Foundation at the CREATE campus to establish TUMCREATE. So we're coming from the heart of Europe to Singapore, and our strong partner here in Singapore is the Nanyang Technological University. Our first endeavor at CREATE was from 2011 to 2016, where we looked at electromobility in tropical megacities, which more than a dozen years ago was a very hot and very innovative topic, ranging all the way from vehicle engineering to electrochemistry and a systematic perspective on mobility. We followed up on that in the next 5 years of our TUMCREATE with a look at how we can optimize public transport in general using autonomous, electrically powered vehicles, again, in close collaboration with Nanyang Technological University. And now we are reinventing ourselves, looking at proteins for Singapore. And to tell you more about this, we have a distinguished panel with us today, which is Dr. Stefan Klade, who is the coordinator of the Proteins for Singapore program, and the two lead PIs, which are Professor Thomas Becker from Technical University of Munich, the chair of brewing technology, and Professor Peter Preiser from the School of Biological Sciences of NTU, where he's also the Associate Vice President for Biomedical and Life Sciences. So over to you.
Now I think it's up to me to present a bit the project Proteins for Singapore. Stefan Klade, do you share your screen to show the slides?
I already do.
Sorry?
I already do.
Yes, this is the second slide. I need the first slide at the very beginning, sorry. Yes, also a very warm welcome from my side as well to everybody here in the round. Yes, my name is Thomas Becker. As Ulf Schlichtmann already said, I'm food and beverage engineer by education. For me, it's an honor to work with food and beverage at all, yes. And we started this initiative, meanwhile, 3 years ago with the first contact with the NIF. And meanwhile, since 9 months, we got it granted, this project, Proteins for Singapore. And as Ulf Schlichtmann said, I was from the very beginning supported by Stefan Klade. He is meanwhile the Director of Innovation and Science for the whole CREATE entity here in Singapore from TUM. But we are not alone. We are not alone. We selected really strong partners, and mainly along of 4 C's. 4 C's. So the first C is complementarity. And here we were looking for somebody who cannot do principally the same what we can do. We are more or less over decades developed an food university. Yes, myself, I work with food since 30 years, but we are looking for a strong university partner who can do things which what we cannot do. And we found with the NTU University, a university which is very strong. I think it's the best university worldwide in meta science and material science. And as well, they are very competent in 3D printing. They didn't print food so far, but they did print other things and other stuff with 3D equipment and units. And for us, it was an ideal partner which can really support our activity very strongly. And here, our second scientific director is Peter Preiser from the NTU, and we both are leading as a scientific director this initiative. But we are also looking for a local and strong partners here directly in Singapore. And we are doing basic research in this project, but we will not forget, and it's not possible to forget, how we can bring this basic research to the market, to the road. And for these things and for this perspective and view, we are really very happy that we can really include the SIT from Singapore, Singaporean Institute of Technology, and the A+star with the SIFPI Institute. And we think as well, when we have some companies inside, will perhaps produce these things we are developing, this can be very helpful. And for this, we are happy that we have with the Nestle company, you know Nestle very, very well, I suppose, and Symrise, an ingredient manufacturer, very strong partners. We can bring a perspectives from the industry to this project. And while we are doing this, please the next slide. We are doing this due to four global threats, or four global, let's say not threats, problems. Yes, the first one is food resilience. Food resilience is very, very important when you look at your citizen in your country. Without enough food, you have a lot of problems, society problems, and you must really tackle this problem. And Singapore recognized during especially the pandemic, corona crisis, that they only produce 2% of foods for themselves. The rest is imported overseas. And for them, it was very, very clear that we must change something in this. And when Singapore is doing something, they do it powerful and strongly. And they called out the strategy 3030. 2030, we want to produce 30% of their own foods. And this is really an ambitious target. But this is true not only for Singapore, but for the rest of the world and the other countries worldwide as well. And the next point is that you have a strong urbanization, not in Europe especially, but especially in the Asia side of the world. There are coming megacities up with 200 million citizens, which is expected for the next 10 to 20 years. And the question is, how can we really provide these citizens there with enough high quality foods? And this is really a challenge and a task we must somehow accomplish. Land scarcity is the next big problem worldwide. Look at the climate change and look at the landscape, which can be used in an agricultural way. It is really going down. What is available for the worldwide citizens, or a food provision of citizens for the citizen. In Europe and Germany, it's not the problem. We have enough agricultural landscape, but worldwide, it's really a global question and a global problem which must be solved. And the next point is that in 10 years, it is expected that 2 billion of people worldwide are underweighted and 3 billion are overweighted. And this is really a problem as well we must somehow solve. And why we are doing this and how we are doing this, and this is in the third slide somehow shown, we were change totally the perspective how we are looking to foods. Not in the traditional way. This is done over decades in the same way. We are really doing strictly recipes. We are sticking to recipes with conventional raw materials, and we are more or less dealing like a cook. This is the way till today most of the foods are produced. But we want to change totally the perspective. We want to go from the end of the value chain. We want to look at the food itself, which pan profiles, which expectations the consumer has to the food, which ingredients should be inside, which texture should the food have, which elasticity, whatever, crispiness, and all these end product qualities should be seen. And we were not sticking to recipes. We are not sticking to a conventional raw materials. We are only looking at the end product qualities, and we want to do in a reverse engineering process how we can produce this with totally new ingredients, with totally new raw materials. We want to really look very broad which raw materials fits to what kind of expectation in the final food. And we also want to look to new processing steps, how we can produce this with really new techniques. Look at the 3D possibilities, 3D printing possibilities, as well as perhaps in a combination with an extrusion process. And this is for us really the chain we are walking along. And we are in the topic one, exploiting at the moment the proteins of soybeans and inside and out production process. It's a fermentation. But we are not dealing directly with the protein or the product or the soybeans itself. We extract the most potential proteins out of these raw materials, and we want to really look which functionality we can expect from which protein or a protein section. And then we want to go in a reverse engineering process and really transform and move these proteins to a state with a predefined, not only ingredient-based, but also biophysical-based texture, matter, structure, whatever necessary for a final product. And this is somehow under the roof, under a characterization platform. We want to really do basic science. I think when we are going a totally new way and want to look to foods as a material, we must understand basic scientific fundamentals and mechanisms. For this, we really build up in our topic 4 and characterization platform, where we want to really very selective and sensitive analyze the things from the beginning of the food chain up to the end. Yes. And this is done over biophysical characterization, a lot of selective and sensitive chemical analytical things or microbiological things, and also we are dealing with healthy aspects. But we cannot do this only for interest. We are also looking to the economical and sustainable potential, and this is done in our topic 5, where we work in the field of life cycle assessment, where we make models how the economical consequences will be and how sustainable the things are we are dealing with. Yes, this was a very quick and comprehensive overview of the project. Hopefully you have now an insight in the project, and if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you very much for the overview, Thomas. I want to emphasize on that. Please be welcome to type in your questions in the stream chat. We would like to engage with you as much as possible. But Peter, like Proteins for Singapore is a collaborative research project with 2 large universities as major contributors. Where do Singapore and the NTU specifically see the advantages in partnering up with the Technical University of Munich?
Thank you, Stefan. I think Professor Becker already alluded to the fact that Singapore had this very ambitious goal of 30% of nutritional needs produced by the year 2030 in Singapore. When you look at Singapore and the land space, etc., it is clear that that needs to really or requires a massive rethink of how we think about food, how we produce food, and all the aspects associated with this. So the traditional ways of producing food is really not a way that Singapore can achieve this 30-30 goal. So food security has been identified as a key area of interest for Singapore. It's a risk, it's a challenge, and Singapore wants to prepare itself. And so as a university, we look at what capacity we have to help Singapore achieve that goal. And it became very clear to us very early on that while we have a lot of solutions, engineering solutions, science approaches that are applicable for food, that could be used to solve some of the challenges around food, we actually didn't have the know-how of food. This critical aspect of, the general understanding of food, what, again, Professor Becker alluded to, structure of food, how food tastes, how do you make actually something like this? And so it was very important for us, if we want to be able to accelerate knowledge creation and innovation in this space, that we need to find a partner that has that competence. And the TU Munich is clearly one of the world-leading institutions around food and, long tradition, long understanding. And so it was an obvious partner for us to approach and see how we could move things forward.
Thank you. That's very interesting. And Thomas, you already elaborated a little bit about why you thought that NTU was a good partner. Which other scientific areas besides only this, the material science, were NTU researchers bringing to our consortium that were in specific parts of TUM?
I think this is what Peter already very clearly said, and it's totally true. Normally we should always look, when we are talking about partners, about the 4 C's I already mentioned. And for me, the complementarity and competence with the NTU is great, is huge for us as our for our TUM or especially for our TUM faculty, life science, because we are really a very strong over decades in food science and technology. But the NTU is, this is what I already said, very strong in material science, yes, and the 3D printing science has a lot of things in data science done in the past, very powerful. And I think these things can be very effectively powerful integrated in our work packages as well in our food area. And this is very great. And I think with the other partners, we found also some complementary aspects which can they bring into our work, and these are more translational things. Yes, bring the things somehow at the end when the basic fundamentals are understood to the market, to products, to processes which can be applied as well for Singapore. And for this, I think this consortium together with our industrial partner is really very strong and broad enough that it can really fulfill the expectations the NIF has at the end of the project for us.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. You've introduced the comprehensive Proteus for Singapore program before. Why did you and the consortium choose Singapore as a location to do this research?
Yes, this has a clear idea behind. This is what I already said. I'm doing food science technology since 30 years, and I'm a Bavarian German guy. And I'm very, very strong engaged in food science and food grants in Europe and Germany. And Germany, especially Europe, I think they are sitting in a luxury situation when we are talking about foods. They have enough landscape, and they are very conservative, traditional when we are talking about food innovations. All the regulations which are in Europe or in Germany are so strong, and they really somehow are hindering really innovations in food science and food technology. They are always see the risk, they are always see the problems, and this is for me a point. I would have never got such a project granted inside Europe, such a big project granted inside Europe, because they are not so open-minded when we are speaking about food innovations. And Singapore is totally different in how they are thinking about new things. They do not allow all what is principally possible, but if they do things, they do it powerful, and they are open-minded enough that they see there's a threat and challenge coming up what food resilience concerns, and they think, okay, we must do things, and they are open to really make new things. And this project is a paradigm change how food should be produced, not conventional over recipes and raw materials conventional, but really look to foods in a material science aspect, yes, and do totally new things with totally new raw materials and try to reconstitute, reverse engineer foods. And this is the reason why we are going to Singapore. And the next point is, when Singapore is doing things, this is what I already said, they do it powerful, and they say, okay, this is a threat, this is a challenge, then they want to turn around a big wheel. And this is the reason why we were looking at Singapore, and we are very happy that we got it granted and can really show what we can in terms of these new food innovation approaches.
Thank you. We talked about the program a bit now. Peter, you're a long-time researcher here in Singapore. What do you think will be focus areas that Singapore acts upon to face the challenges outlined before, besides supporting research programs like Proteus for Singapore?
Well, I think one of the key things is that in Singapore, which is, I think always very different, is the close integration of what happens at research, how you innovate, and then how do you actually translate it to create products or jobs. And in Singapore, it is really an integrated strategy. So in the context of the food security issue, it's not just that programs like Protein for Singapore or other programs are supported that are driven by academics, but there's also an engagement with industry, bringing in industry to set up and create opportunities in Singapore for this innovation. And I think what is the other component was already alluded to is to ensure that the regulatory environment is aligned with the innovation, so that innovation actually has a pathway to the market, because it doesn't matter how much you innovate, if you can't get it into the market, it becomes a dead end. And there's is reflected to some extent. I think Singapore was the first country to approve, the lab-grown chicken, and there's also a fish meat that is lab-based fish production. So it is creating an environment where, which allows innovation to flourish. And I think this is also very interesting from all the young listeners here. In Singapore, you have an environment where there is a real interesting pathway between the academic work, what happens at universities, and how to move that into real products. Often there seems to be this separation, between a university and academic research and industry. Both of them consider themselves with some kind of skepticism and the dark side. Here, we look at this as a pathway to make novel ideas and discoveries at the university and actually creating the impact for society.
Okay, thank you. There's actually one question in the from the audience. They said, I'm curious, Professor Becker, they thought you mentioned you were mainly looking into brewery and beverage. So why is it now proteins? Will you also consider beverage with proteins or more additional food material?
Yes, this is what Ulf Schlichtmann said in the previous introduction of myself. Yes, by education, I'm a food engineer. Yes, I'm food engineer, and my chair is called really brewing and beverage technology. But one main part of my institute is really cereal technology. What can be done with cereal? I normally say with a lot of water, I do with cereals. Beverages with less water, I'm doing, let's say, baked products or more stiff products. And this is very a strong activity I have at my chair as well. And I think this is exactly inside what we want to do here in Proteins for Singapore. I think beverages is as important as foods, yes, as stiff or solid foods. But I think there are totally other aspects to consider, and the way how you produce the beverages with also other protein sources are of interest, but it's not so much inside this project. We are dealing here really with more solid food products, more, let's say, meat artificials or meat constitutions, perhaps, which can be done of cereal or protein products from other sources. And one part of my chair is really very intensively dealing with this.
Thank you. There's another question to add on to that directly. Will you look into fusion products between extruded and 3D printed proteins with cell cultures, like Peter already mentioned, lab-grown meat?
I think we are very intensively working since a couple of years for direct printing of foods with 3D techniques. Yeah, we are not using 3D as an ad for whatever experimental setup. We are directly printing foods over 3D. This is what we are doing since a couple of years. And we see when we, pre-transform the raw materials, especially the proteins, we can perhaps really produce a structure, a texture, which can be compared to a meat structure or a meat texture when we are doing it in the right way with 3D printing. But 3D printing is a technique at the moment where you can only do small things, yes, in small units with a small volume. And so we have some ideas which we are elaborating at the moment with some manufacturing companies, where we can bring the advantages of an, let's say, extrusion process together with a 3D printing unit. And the final goal, or one final goal of our topic 3 in this reverse engineering approach, is really to develop a 3D printing, a totally new 3D printing system based upon extrusion, where we can provide exactly what Peter said already, this combination of a fibrillaire structure with a more foamy or elastic structure directly coming out of the 3D printing system. This is let's say an process development or an aggregate development, which is inside the scope of this project.
Can I maybe just add something to this? I think a critical part is, that whatever we do, at the end, people need to eat it. Otherwise, it doesn't become food. And I think the question about whether beverages or just protein beverages, I think people, it's not just about providing the nutritional needs. It is actually also to encourage people to see this as a real alternative to some of the less sustainable processed products in the food market. So that's one point, just that is critical, and I think we will use any strategy to pull together to deliver that outcome. But the other aspect, and I think it was to reiterate, is that we very much look at the economics of all this. There might be approaches out there which would give us the perfect product, but it's not economically viable. So it's very important that we always look back at the economic aspect and sustainability aspect of what we do to ensure that we deliver the right product that is sustainable and economic, because food is one of the things that's also very price sensitive. You know, it needs to be at the end affordable to a large majority of the people for it to really have the impact that we want to achieve.
Thank you, Peter. We still got like 2 or 3 minutes for one last question left. Our auditorium seems to be mostly young scientists today. What do you say, Peter? Why is this program here in Singapore interesting for young scientists especially?
Because I think it's trying to disrupt how we think about food. I think for many, you know, food is in many ways so old hat. You know, it's absolutely essential, and food. But here now is an opportunity to really bring together new ways of thinking. And I think Professor Becker already alluded to the fact that material science is critical. You know, there is fantastic material science applied to many, many things, but not for food. All the analytics, all the data, all the other aspects that are being used for many, many different applications is not being used here in the area of food, or it's just starting to be used. So for young scientists who want to really do something and have an impact, this project is really bringing together many, many disciplines, not necessarily from food, but to tackle an important aspect of food security and production.
So, yes, and sorry, and to add something in this as well, when we are talking about food science and food technology, and we are looking how the people are thinking, especially in Europe or in Germany, they are saying it's an old-fashioned discipline. It's an old-fashioned discipline which exists since tons of years already. And now I hope that the young guys here sitting, yes, they can open their mind a bit, that food is a very challenging and very new discipline. We can see it in a totally different way. And then we open totally new methods, which can be really exploited to do new things. And this is really, I think, the right place where we should really trigger these ideas, because these young guys sitting here are not only the most potential worldwide, but also the one who will perhaps decide the things in 10 or 20 years. And if they really see food not as a conventional, traditional, old-fashioned stuff, but as a really exciting new aspect or a discipline, I think we can help a lot, not only for our own interest to really accomplish and get things granted at the end, but really bring the society and this really step up.
Okay. Thank you very much for your ideas and for the questions. I think we're at the end of our short discussion. Also, thank you to the NRF and to GYSS Organizational Committee for including us in this amazing conference. And I think we can take later on some of these ideas to apply them to having lunch. If it's lab-grown meat or traditional chicken or more sustainable vegetables. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you all speakers. Thank you so much.